Welcome to the thought for this week, the Parsha of Tzav, and the week in which, this Motzai Shabbos, we're going to be celebrating the festival of Purim. However, I believe that many of us are going to struggle to find a place in our hearts for the celebrations of Purim in light of the fact that not only what's going on in the world, but specifically that which is going on in the Jewish world. Where Shabbos, this past Shabbos, Friday night, a family of 5 were brutally massacred and murdered in the town of Itamar. Included within this family was a child of 11, of 4, and the tender baby of 3 months old. Massacred brutally, not only on the holy day of Shabbos, but in a fashion that is even beyond the imagination of the wildest, most brutal mass murderer, and certainly beyond the pale of us tender, loving Jewish people. And how does one come off the back of such an event and celebrate the joyous occasion of Purim is indeed difficult, but perhaps with the thought that I'm going to share with you, we can find some way, some inspiration that will allow us to celebrate this Purim. You see, what happened this last Friday night reminds us of 2 things. It reminds us that Haman is alive and well, and the episode of the Megillah is not a recounting of an event in history, but a reminder that in every generation, as our rabbis tell us, and as we shall read in the Megillah, in the Haggadah, nations arise up against us, not in a bid to live side by side, but in a bid and in a desire to annihilate us. And just as it is true that in every generation there has been a Hitler that has arisen, there have been Palestinian terrorists that have arisen to wipe out Jewish people, unfortunately, to brutally murder an innocent 3-month-old, 4-year-old, 11-year-old and the parents. But just as that is true, so too is it true that V'akadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam, the God Almighty saves us from their hands. And just as Haman and his descendants are no longer here, but the Jewish people are alive and well, commemorating and celebrating his defeat, so too shall the Jewish people remain for all eternity, celebrating the defeat of our enemies and the eternity of our people. In the Megillah that we will read both Motzai Shabbos and Sunday, we will read the famous story that really doesn't require much of a recounting. Suffice to highlight perhaps the most salient points, certainly, that I wish to bring to your attention. It mentions in the Megillah how Mordechai Tzaddik was under perilous danger for Haman because he refused to bow down. And Haman goes to his advisors and his wife and says that this really bothers him, that notwithstanding all the great importance which is attributed to Haman by the king and all those around him, the fact that this one Jew is not willing to bow, is not willing to cower, is not willing to diminish himself in the light of Haman, really bothers Haman to the core, and he wants to find a way of getting rid of him. And the suggestion is, in the context of Mordechai, go make a gallows upon which you will hang Mordechai Tzaddik, and go to the king and request permission to hang and to execute one of his trusted advisors. And that night, the Megillah tells us, Achashverosh was unable to sleep. He asks that the book of remembrance be opened and read, and sure enough, when they open it up, they read of the account of how Mordechai Tzaddik, knowing the language of Tarshish, was able to forewarn the king Achashverosh of the plot by Bigsan and Seresh to have him assassinated. Achashverosh asks, what good has been done in return to this Mordechai Tzaddik? And he's informed nothing. That nothing was done as an expression of gratitude. And thinking and trying to think, what should I do? How should I reward him? All of a sudden, lo and behold, another advisor enters the room, none other than Haman HaRasha. And the king asks Haman, tell me, what should I do to express my gratitude and appreciation to an individual whom I truly recognize and appreciate? Haman, with his ego, being as great as it was, assumes automatically that it's him. And therefore he suggests that this gentleman should be dressed in royal garb, that he should be paraded on the king's horse by a gentry from the king's own palace, with this individual saying, Kacha yeyaseh lo ish asher hamelech chafetz bikoreh. So shall be done to the individual whom the king wishes to pay tribute to. Achashverosh turns to Haman and says, brilliant idea. Go do everything that you have stated. Al tapel davar, do not fall short on even one matter, and go do it to Mordechai HaTzadik. And Haman is forlorn. How can it be that he has now got to go and parade Mordechai HaTzadik in front of everyone while he's on the king's horse and in the king's regalia and garb? But the king has decreed, so shall he fulfill. The Medrash tells us that as he was walking through the streets, one of Haman's daughters was standing on the roof, assuming, as her father did, that riding on the horse would be none other than Haman Harasha. And parading the horse and calling in front, so shall be done to the king, to the individual whom the king wants to reward, is none other than Mordechai HaTzadik, the arch enemy, the nemesis of her beloved father Haman Harasha. And our rabbis tell us that she took all the, you'll excuse me, the excrement that was in the bucket that they used in those days, and she throws it down onto the would-be Mordechai who is walking in front of the horse. And as he reaches the height and the crescendo of his disgrace, where he has been so publicly humiliated by having this poured over him, Haman looks up to see who did this to him. And it's none other than his beloved daughter. And the daughter looks down, hoping with glee that she will see a shamed and embarrassed Mordechai, and instead she sees her father looking up to her, smelling and stinking. And out of total despair, she casts herself down from the roof and dies. Haman returns home, says the Megillah, a veil of chafui rosh. He's mourning the loss of his daughter. And now all his friends come around him, and Vashti and his wife Zeresh comes next to him, and she says to him, darling, if your nemesis Mordechai is of Jewish descent, lo tuchal lo, you will not be able to overcome him. Ki nafol tipol lefanav, you shall surely fall down. And what she was saying is that now that we can see the elevation of Mordechai because of his Jewish descent and lineage, there is nothing you can do under the sun. With all your bribing the king, you will not be able to overcome. You, my beloved and dear husband, will be defeated. When the Jewish people start to ascend, you cannot hold us back. And I'd like to share with you an indication of how we have started to ascend and to grow from that calamitous event in Itamar. And I'm grateful to Jonathan Zatiski, who forwarded me this email just today. The email articulates how the family, the remaining family, the children, grandparents were sitting shiva for the brutalized and murdered family in Itamar. And all of a sudden a gentleman walks in, a gentleman who is well known. Well known because he owns one of the largest chain stores of groceries and foodstuffs in Israel. And he walks in laden with food, and he goes to the cupboard and he stacks up the cupboard. And he does so a second day and a third day. And after a while he turns to them and he says, I want you to get used to seeing me. I made a promise that I will ensure every week that your pantry is stored and stocked to the fill until such time as the youngest of the children mourning will turn 18. My friends, the Jewish people are on the rise. And even though we suffered a terrible decree by the Haman of today, who sought to wipe out a family, the spirit of the Jewish people shall never be quashed. And just as this gentleman showed that we shall rise above it, and we shall move forward, and the kindness and the compassion and the care which we have for our fellow Jew shall come to the fore, so too shall God, Omed Aleinu, He will stand above us, not, God forbid, to do anything other than to watch over us. And He will ensure that all those who rise up against us will fail in their bid, and He will protect us and destroy our enemies. The story of Purim is not a reminder of the past, but it's an inspiration for our present and our future. Haman was incapable of defeating the Jews. His wife, a co-conspirator, recognized this, my friends. No one, but no one will destroy the Jewish people, not in body, not in soul, and not in spirit. And with that, we need to go to the Megillah reading, with the knowledge and the joy that we are an eternal people that shall never be destroyed. That you can hurt us, and you can cause grief that is indescribable and pain that is national. But we shall remain forever. Am Yisrael Chai. And I just wanted to end off that we should end off on a high with an inspiration of Purim, looking forward to an exciting and exhilarating Megillah. And please God, we should merit to celebrate it together with our brothers and sisters in Israel. I wanted to end off with the following. Don't forget to dress up. We're coming up to Purim. The Jewish people are alive and well. Am Yisrael Chai. Let's defeat our enemies, not by killing them, but by rejoicing, celebrating, and let the Jewish spirit go aloft to its highest levels. Wishing you a good Shabbos and a happy and a freilichen Purim.